one of the guests that I was really excited about having on today in the studio with me, and I only literally found out minutes ago will not be joining me anymore, is legendary rock manager Doc McGhee. Now, I don't know Doc McGhee all that well. I've met him a couple times. I know some people in his office over the decades of working in the music business myself. I know some people who work very close working with him, and I know we have many, many mutual friends. So over the years, the times I've seen Doc have always been very cordial. And I don't know the man well enough to tell you one thing or another about anything more than that. I was very, very much looking forward to spending a good hour and a half with him today to get to know him and to get into his career and talk about all of the artists that he has managed. And there are many, from Bon Jovi to Scorpions to Skid Row to Kiss. Did I mention he manages Kiss currently? To Kiss. He also has he has Down, which my good friend Snake Sabo manages out of his office. He has a band called Vintage Trouble that's very cool. Hootie and the Blowfish. I think he manages Darius's solo career. Does he also manage? No, just Hootie. He doesn't have Hootie anymore. Oh, he's no longer with. Okay, well, he had Hootie. There's a lot of bands he had that I mentioned. The one that I can tell, the ones I know he has currently: Vintage Trouble, Down, Kiss. Did I mention Kiss? Yeah, Kiss. And he had Scorpions, he had Bon Jovi at their height, he had Motley Crue at their height. And I'm sure he has amazing stories. I've heard some of them because my good friend Chris Jericho, who does a podcast, Doc was a guest on that podcast, and I listened to that episode and I found it very entertaining. And I would have loved to have dove into some of those stories and many, many more with him in his career. But unexpectedly, he canceled literally minutes ago on a show that we had booked him on and that we had cleared a great amount of time, and also told a number of artists that we were unavailable to have them in today or on because we were committed to having Doc. Now, Doc, being a manager and being on the other side of booking guests for events, surely knows that it is pretty much out of the norm and out of the realm of any sort of business etiquette to cancel on somebody literally minutes before you're supposed to show up on their program. And there is only one explanation for this cancellation, folks. There really is. And that is the fact that everybody knows that for 10, 15 years now, that, I'm not going to say Kiss, but that Paul Stanley specifically does not like me. He does not like me because I have a platform and a voice and an opinion about things. And I welcome and appreciate other opinions as well. And I love engaging in debate and dialogue. But I have it on very good authority here and it's as obvious as the nose on my face that this cancellation took place because Doc found out, for whatever reason, Doc didn't know that I hosted this show. Apparently, his assistant or what have you, he said, only told him that he was coming to do an interview on Sirius XM, not an interview with Satan himself, Eddie Trunk. Nobody told him that. Nobody told him that he was coming to sit with the devil on Halloween. And when he found that out, I'm certain that a one Mr. Stanley, who I also promoted on social media that Doc was going to be in, I'm sure that he threw a hissy fit, and maybe he didn't even have to throw a hissy fit and just basically sent a text or a note to Doc, and Doc immediately turned his car around and said, "Whoa, can't go on with that guy. God forbid." It is laughable and it's hysterical, and in a way it's extremely flattering. It really is. You got to understand something. There's a history here, you guys. Paul Stanley had me banned a few years ago from a Kiss mini golf event. I'm not kidding you. I wish I could make this up. I was supposed to do an appearance at a Kiss mini golf in Vegas. And then the day before I got there, he told the owners of the mini golf, who just licensed the name, that they couldn't have me in the building. Now, you would say to yourself, what possibly could this guy, who, by the way, has been a lifelong Kiss fan, who played every era of Kiss and still does, who does yearly all Kiss radio specials, what possibly could this guy have done? Did I rob money from them? Did I injure one of their loved ones? It's hysterical. The sensitivity is hysterical. And Paul Stanley, in his own book, writes about his unbelievable sensitivity. So, but can you, again, I'm flattered by this. My hero in radio was, is, and always has been Howard Stern. Do you know how many people eventually would not do Howard Stern's show, but have now done it because they can't get away from it? I mean, it's happened, and there's 1,000 cases of that. Because Howard told it like it is and stuck to his guns and called people out. And to think that my career has gotten into the realm, there's so many people that also steer away from Howard because, God forbid, what he may say or what he may ask, he's actually going to do a real interview. He's actually educated. There's a ton of people that do interviews. They don't want an educated interviewer. They want somebody to sit down and simply say, hey, so tell us about your new record, and get all the PC, politically correct bullshit answers, basically spitting back their press release to you, and walk out the door. They sold their stuff. They're on their way. That's what most artists want. They don't want to answer a tough question. They don't want anybody who truly knows what's going on. Not most, but some, especially if you are hypersensitive. And again, Paul Stanley, by his own admission, is hypersensitive. Read his book. So no one is going to tell me what's really happened here. And I don't blame Doc McGhee. I don't know Doc McGhee. Great for Doc. I understand that if his biggest client doesn't want him to do an interview on a radio show, of course Doc isn't going to do it. You think Doc is going to jeopardize a relationship with his cash cow to come and sit and talk to me? So I don't blame Doc for this. It's a dick move. You'd love to see the guy step up and say, no, listen, I manage other bands besides you. This has been promoted. We're going to talk about it, and I'll answer how I answer. But of course, he's not going to do that. He's going to cave. This is a cash cow for him. So I don't blame him for doing it. But I am empowered by this. This to me, I cannot tell you enough. When things like this happen, it is a huge compliment to me. It's a huge compliment because it shows that my voice has resonated, that my audience has such a reach. I never think of myself in these terms. I appreciate everybody that listens to me. I appreciate that over 33 years in the business, I made great connections with people, okay? I appreciate that, but I don't ever take a step back and say, wow, do I really have that sort of influence? But now to think that after all these years, I am so dangerous that I must be banned from Kiss Mini Golf and anything. And there's other stories as well. And that, when it got through the food chain and, you can't do that. You can't. Now the ridiculousness of this is the fact that I love objective conversation. I love to have the debate and the discussion. I would love to hear Doc counter some of the things that I was going to talk to him about Kiss. I wanted to talk about the good stuff, the not so good stuff, the stuff that I agree with, that I don't agree with, where they're headed from here. Could have been a great promotional platform. I wasn't just sitting here to do a bash fest. Unfortunately, nobody actually listens to what I say. They just grab headlines from it, and nobody takes the time to actually talk to me about my feelings and how objective I am and how much credit I do give people, even if I don't agree with what they're doing. And the fact that I am such a threat just because I have an opinion. And you ready for this, guys? Because it's been blown so ridiculously out of proportion. I was an enormous Kiss fan. I have been my whole life. They were my gateway band into music. Okay? And I get what they do now. I don't blame them for doing what they do now. I think it's ridiculous, but I don't blame them for it. And what they do now, and what I mean by that, is dressing two other guys as Ace and Peter. And I will stand by that for the rest of my life. And here's the other thing. A lot of other people think it's ridiculous too. But they're afraid to say it. Tons of bands think it's ridiculous, but they're afraid to say it. The only one who had the balls to say it was Dee Snider, who then went into this huge Twitter war with Paul Stanley over it. And that was a big thing, 6 months ago? And now, interestingly enough, Twisted Sister's last show is in Mexico on the same bill right before Kiss in like a week or two. I don't know. Maybe Paul's on the phone with that promoter trying to get Twisted Sister removed. I don't know. But it's flattering that I have this amount of influence and reach to an audience. It really, really, for me, is extremely complimentary. That instead of just having an adult conversation, you have to run away, run. It's toxic. You want to know how crazy it is? A couple years ago, and by the way, I've heard from so many bands who agree with my position on what Kiss has done with the Impersonation Act, and I find it extremely interesting. I would love to have had this conversation with Doc, because we all know Kiss is headed to a band that will have no original members soon. So there'd be so many great conversations. By the way, Doc confirmed what I just said on Jericho's podcast. That day is coming soon. But I'm the enemy. I can't have this debate, or I can't have this discussion. And there's so many bands that feel the way I do. I can't tell you how many, and many who have opened for Kiss, who have sat there and told me off the record, oh, yeah, man. It's just the hypocrisy of it is unbelievable, that you can't, that I am such a threat that even the manager, who has managed countless bands, and of course, wasn't just going to talk to Kiss about the band, with Doc. Are you kidding me? The stories with Bon Jovi and Motley Crue alone, we could have done hours on. But again, I don't blame Doc. I get it. He's got a business to run, and he's got to take his orders from above, apparently. But thank you, because I never knew. I mean, being banned from Kiss Mini Golf, that's one thing. Nikki Six thought that story was hysterical, by the way, for the longest time. He thought that was hysterical. And it's true. It's all true. All for a kid that just grew up loving Kiss to have it go to this level. So this is what's happened, and I'm straight and honest with my audience. And it's unfortunate, but it's all good. So we're going to talk to you guys about music and move on to other things. And later on, we're going to talk to Wendy Dio. And your calls are always welcome on my show. It is live on this Halloween Monday, towards the end of the morning and into the middle of the afternoon on the East Coast. We're in Los Angeles, 844-686-5863. Toll-free nationwide telephone number, 844-6-VOLUME. So that is the deal. And, it's funny, too. One more thing before we go to break, and we'll come back and we'll take some of your calls. In all the years that Kiss has messed with me in these ways, I never, ever let it take away from my fan side, that I'll always be a fan. To the point that I even still play their new records on the radio, which nobody does, especially in major markets. To the point that I still do a yearly annual all Kiss radio show, which I never, because why should fans, and I still consider myself one of them, why should fans be penalized for this nonsense? But I don't know, it might be starting to be time to rethink that a little bit. Because after 33 years, maybe, I'm so powerful that maybe I just will, flex my muscle a little bit. It's ridiculously comical. Last thing I'll tell you is I had this is how silly it is. I met with Gene Simmons about 3 years ago maybe. There's an event called the Golden Gods. I'll tell you that story when we come back, and we'll take some of your calls. Alex is telling me we got to go to a break. So let's do this break. We'll come back. I want to tell you one funny Gene Simmons story about, just so you can hear the absurdity of this with my relationship with this band that I loved my whole life. But he's petrified of me. Happy Halloween, everybody. Eddie Trunk, a.k.a. Satan, live on the air with you until 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific on this Monday. We'll take your calls. I'll tell you that story, and we'll get into a lot more. Trunk Nation, Sirius XM 106 volume.
Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk.
On volume, Sirius XM 106.
This is Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk.
On volume, Sirius XM 106.
Just call me Eddie Trunk, a.k.a. the Devil, today. Especially appropriate for Halloween, right? Live from Los Angeles, Trunk Nation, Sirius XM 106, live Monday to Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, 11 a to 1 p. Pacific, which is where I am on the Pacific time zone, here all week with a great lineup of guests. Tomorrow in studio with me, blues legend. He is a modern rock blues legend, Joe Bonamassa. This guy plays huge venues throughout the world, really. Very, very popular in Europe and the UK, and played Radio City Music Hall in New York. Hugely popular blues rock artists. And Joe is also in the band Black Country Communion, which had broken up and is now back together. That band also features Glenn Hughes. So Glenn is also coming in. Now, Glenn has a brand new solo album to promote. So Joe will be in to hang with us in the first hour. Then maybe we'll do a little overlap with Glenn and Joe. And then Joe will leave, and then we'll let Glenn get into promoting his solo record and talking about Glenn stuff. So a total rock legend. Glenn went to the Hall of Fame with Deep Purple. The most recent induction, and Bonamassa just one of the masters out there when it comes to blues rock guitar playing, and looking forward to seeing both of them tomorrow and having them both in the studio. But back to we're going to go to your calls again in just a second. 844-686-5863, 844-6-volume. But just back to the Kiss thing real quickly here. A couple things you got to know, because, again, I find this whole situation so silly and so juvenile and so ridiculous that you just can't, if you've got somebody that has a differing opinion, instead of just manning up and sitting down and discussing it and debating it in a respectful way, which I'd love to do, you run. You paint them as the enemy. You run from it. You run. So the last time I ever spoke to Paul Stanley, he did an art gallery opening by my house in New Jersey. This has got to be 6-7 years ago. And I went to the gallery because he's always had this flip-flop relationship with me, and I don't talk to the man, so I don't ever know what's in his head. He's very easily influenced and gets consumed, I'm sure, by reading stuff online, which we all know how accurate and in context that can be, right? So it's very frustrating because there have been times where he's been totally cool, and then literally 24 hours later, I don't know what he hears or what sort of distorted information he hears, but he turns and then I'm the enemy. I'm the devil again. So like 6 years ago, these are true stories, I swear on the life of my kids. I went to my radio station that I do my FM show on in New York. He was there doing the morning show. I wasn't even in the building at the time. And I go in to do my show and I look and there's an ID. And you know what an artist ID is. It's when you hear radio and it's like, hi, this is Eddie Van Halen and you're listening to Trunk Nation, whatever. You know, you've heard them all the time on radio. So there's this ID in the computer. I didn't ask for it. I don't know where it came from. It said Paul Stanley, Eddie Trunk ID. So now, as far as I knew at that point, Paul didn't like me. Because again, I never know what he's hearing. I don't know what's going on. So I hit the ID. I still have this ID. And the ID says, and out of respect, because I am respectful, and everybody in the world does the Paul Stanley voice, and I don't, but of course, you know, nobody remembers the respectful things I do. It says, hey, it's Paul Stanley, and you're listening to my loyal friend and fan, Eddie Trunk, on Q104 in New York. Oh, okay. I guess I'm cool with Paul Stanley now, right? So the next day, he's doing this art gallery thing. So I go to the art gallery, and I just go to look at the art. Now, at those gallery things, Paul doesn't engage with the fans because that costs money to do that. You can't, he just stands behind a rope, and unless you buy a painting, you don't get to take a picture with them or really talk to him or shake his hand or anything. Okay, fine, I understand, whatever. I wasn't looking to do that. I wanted to say hi, thank him for the ID very briefly, look at the art, and leave. The place was 15 minutes from my house, Short Hills Mall in New Jersey. So I walk in, very low-key, I stand in the back, and I'm looking around at the art and checking it out. And of course, 99% of Kiss fans are fans of what I do because they know how much I fought and supported Kiss and still do, which is the real irony and ridiculousness of all this. And some guy comes running over to me, goes, hey, Eddie Trunk, you got to go say hi to Paul Stanley. Well, you know, he's busy. I don't want to. No, come over. Come to the corner. Say hello. There's a guy that I knew and that Paul knew. So I go to the corner and Paul starts giving me this attitude like, so do you like me today? Or some weird sort of like thing. And I was like, looking at him like, what? Wait a minute. 24 hours ago, you cut an ID calling me your loyal friend and fan. Now you don't like me? What happened in 24 hours? I didn't even talk about you to anybody in 24 hours. And it was frustrating beyond belief. Because you don't know what sort of lunatics get in people's ears and start chirping and saying stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of people, and there's a segment of fans with an agenda, you know, where they want to trump up some stuff and make it sound like things you said and that you didn't say and inflate it because they feel it gets them on the good side of the artist. Because they're such super fans that it makes I'm going to get close to the artist because I'm going to pile on this guy because he said one thing he didn't like. So I don't know what the hell happened. And I'll never forget this. It was so weird to me and so out of left field that I said to him, I said to him, Paul, you know, I really don't know what goes on in your head with me and what you think I may or may not have said. But I said, I would love if we could just go back in that office for 5 minutes and sit down man to man and work this out because it's really silly. I don't know what's going on. I honestly don't know what's going on here. And he looked at me and goes, sure, we'll do that sometime. And he literally left. He turned around. He was almost out of time anyway, so he didn't leave because I was there, but it was 5 minutes left from the appearance. He turned around. He yelled to the crowd, hey, everybody, look who's here, Eddie Trunk, say hi. The whole place turns around, sees me, starts taking pictures with me, and he bolts right out the back door. That was the last time I talked to the guy. When I asked him, sit down, man up, man to man, tell me what's going on, let's work this out. I'm a fan. It's ludicrous. But because I have a position that does not fall in line with what they want to sell you now, I'm the devil. And then I run into Gene Simmons out here in L.A. at the Golden Gods Awards a couple years after that. This would have been maybe 3-4 years ago. And Gene is in this booth in the pre-party area of the Golden Gods. And I go, he's sitting there with his son. And I'm so tired of this juvenile, petty, ridiculous behavior. That's why it's so refreshing to deal with a band like Metallica, who are still fans. They're not full. They're not in that sort of space where they're so full of themselves. They can talk about their faults. Jesus, did you guys hear my interview with Lars like a week ago? On this show a week and a half ago. I mean, we could talk about Lulu and that it was it didn't do well. We could talk about that the movie tanked. When Death Magnetic came out, I told him I loved the record, but the sound quality I thought sucked. He still sits down and talks. They're fans. They get it. They're normal. It's insanity when you think about this. So the last thing on the Kiss thing, and then we're going to take your calls about anything you want to talk about. But the last thing on the Kiss thing is this. So I go to the Golden Gods. I see Gene sitting in a booth, and I so just want to clear the air on this nonsense. So I look at Gene, and I said, hey, Gene, I make a motion. I go, can I come talk to you? Now, Gene is the most no bullshit guy in the world. Gene is just falling in line because he doesn't want to upset Paul. This is all what Doc did today. Gene, it's all about not upsetting Paul. Hype, Mr., by his own admission, sensitive man. So Gene motions for me to come. There's a velvet rope and a security guy there. Gene motions for me to come in. So I go, I sit down. There's photos of this. I have a million photos of this exchange, by the way, because as soon as I went behind the rope, everybody, started taking pictures of me talking to Gene. And I said to Gene, I go, hey, Gene, listen, man, I don't know what's going on with me and your band. You guys don't want to come on my shows. All the fans want to see you on my shows. None of this makes any sense. All I ever said is I wish you gave Tommy and Eric their own makeup. I don't get it. But it's not for me, but I don't understand what's happened here. And Gene continually looked at me and said, I have no problem with you. You're clearly very successful and you're good at what you, I have no problem with you. I have no problem with you. I said, well, if you have no problem with me, come on the shows then and talk to the fans. I don't know what this is about. Maybe I will one day. So that was it. We shook hands. There's photos of it everywhere. Next day, got tweeted out, Eddie Trunk hangs with Gene Simmons. 24 hours or less later, after a cordial, nice exchange, when Gene Simmons told me he had no problem with me, he blocked me on Twitter. That's insanity. That's insane. That's like, so where do you think that came from? Probably the same place that came from, resulting in an empty chair sitting in front of me. It's ludicrous. I love it. Like I said, it's extremely flattering. All right, we're going to talk to you. Let's take the break, and we'll come back. We'll get your calls in at about anything you want to talk about, and I have other things to cover as well. But I needed to get this out, and it's out, and it is what it is, and we will move on to other things at 844-686-5863, 844-6-VOLUME. You're hanging with Satan, the devil himself, on Halloween on Trunk Nation, Sirius XM 106. Your call's coming up next.